I'm glad you're back with us for this next session, session 4. Our first 3 sessions have prepared us. We looked at the condition that's in our lives. We're blinded by lies. We looked at the truth that help is on the way, and then we've looked at the reality of what's been invested in us. We've learned what we're up against. Well, now it's time to get into motion. You see, motion sometimes has been difficult to envision because we have to move out of very familiar places. You see, God can declare our freedom, but we have to be willing to enter in. What if God had said of the Israelites, "You're free, let my people go," but they said, "No, we'll just stay here in Egypt." You see, they had to move. So today's session, session 4, is called Moving Out. It's time to move out from those old places of pain and into new freedom. So get ready because we're going to start moving. Here we go with session 4. All right, so having been through some pretty heavy lifting in session 3, as we talked about what I'm up against, what's gotten into me. We sent you away to do some pretty heavy work. We're going to talk now into the movement sessions, I call them. This first session, session 4 of the movement sessions, is called Moving Out. The one thing we're going to learn about how God works with the Israelites through all of their process in moving from slavery into freedom is that He forces them forward and then closes a gate behind them. And then He forces them a little more forward and He forces a gate behind them. And I want us to watch and understand the difficulty that we see these people go through, the wrestling that they do with their past as God is moving them forward. See, if we're the Israelites, we're asking God, why can't you just take us out of Egypt and drop us in the promised land? No enemies to overcome. Can't you just get on with getting on already? Why the process? Okay? Well, God, we're going to see why God is doing this. Because again, He's not just interested in giving us the immediate relief. He wants to form our character. So we're going to watch this happening. So, have you ever moved to a new residence? A new town maybe? It's all different. The surroundings are different. You got to navigate your way around town. Your old connections aren't there anymore. You drive down the street, you're not sure where you're going. You need directions at first to get everywhere. Moving out isn't always easy. It shakes up our world. And when we begin to move out of the old and into the new, it's going to shake up our world. In the spiritual sense, God has to move us out of where we have been stuck. Wherever we've been spinning our wheels, and we have been kind of just going around, God has to get us unstuck. That's what He had to do for the Israelites. This is where our participation is really going to kick in at this point. You say, well, haven't I been participating already? Yes, you have. You've been processing through a lot of personal issues. You've been digging through your past. You've been hearing principles. We've been asking you to engage your voice in speaking the truth of what God wants for your life. Now, what we're going to do, though, is really get into some active movement participation. I'm going to begin to step away from what I have known and into something new. We're going to talk about actually changing people, places, and things, locations, geography, relationships, all kinds of things. The Israelites had to do it, and we will have to do it too. I love this verse in Exodus 13, 3-4. Then Moses said to the people, "Commemorate this day, the day you came out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery, because the Lord brought you out of it with a mighty hand." Israel detested their chains. They hated them. They didn't want to be slaves. They wanted out of being slaves. They wanted to get to their promised land. But here's the deal with it. Egypt was their familiar place, and slavery was their familiar condition. Moving requires us to give up those familiar things. I want to give you an example of what this is like. So, I know a guy stuck in a dead-end job, doesn't like the job, hates the job. The administration, the people who run the business for which he works, they're a mess. And the place is so dysfunctional, he often says, "I don't know how this place stays open. I just keep going to work hoping my paycheck cashes this week. I have no idea how this business survives. That's how big of a mess it is. So I say to him, why don't you get another job? Sounds like a reasonable question, right? I know this person to be extremely talented. They have gifts and abilities. I know that they would be highly valuable to other employers. But this person says, well, I've got this health condition. They give me flexibility with this health condition. No one else is ever going to give me that flexibility. And I said, well, I'm not convinced of that. Have you tried applying for something and stating your condition and seeing if they're willing to work? No, I haven't done that because I know they're not going to give that to me. Well, I'm just saying, you got this nut basket who's willing to give it to you now. You think there's no other human being on the earth that would see value in what you do and being willing to give you flexibility in your job. Well, after pressing and realizing that pretty much this person had made up their mind, this is what they said to me. They said, look, that boss in that place might be the devil, but it's the devil I know. Now, I want you to think about that for a moment in terms of ourselves. In my own life, living with shame, it had been invested in me since I was a young boy. I can see that now. Once I know all this and I begin rewinding the tapes, I can watch it, walk out like a grand construction project from my earliest years all the way up until my early adulthood. It was formed in me. It was woven into the fabric of my life. That was the way my parents felt they could motivate me, just shame the living snot out of me. That was what they thought they could do to me. And so I was always just, well, I guess I'm bad. My thoughts are bad. I'll never be able to be successful. All of these never, I can't, I won't. That was what got woven into the fabric of my life. Now, it's the devil, but it became the devil I know. And everything gives birth out of this. If you think that doesn't affect relationships, guess again. It affects every relationship you're in. Someone says something to you. Have you ever met someone that's hypersensitive? That was me. Someone says something to you and you're like, oh no, I guess I've done something wrong. I guess I, messed this all up, and you're constantly calling. I had someone I would call like that before. I would call and say, hey, they were like, oh, you're calling, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I want to say hi. You see, this is what the junk in our closet does to us. It manifests itself in the present. It's the devil. We don't like it. We loathe it. We detest it. We wish it would fall off of us. We wish it would go away. We've tried to pray it away, but it's the devil we know. Try to pry it out of our cold, dead hands. It has served us well over the years, if we're honest about it. And this was the same way with the Israelites. Egypt was familiar. Fear of the unfamiliar is rooted in the false identity. When you go like, I can't move. Why can't you move? I don't know, I'm just afraid. I'll never make it there. Why won't you make it there? I'll never be able to make friends there. I'll never get a job there. I'll never this there. I'll never. It's rooted in the false identity that keeps telling you can't, you won't, you aren't. This is why we need healing, so we can move forward into a future full of hope. It's rooted in the false identity and the false mindset of slavery. Here's what we believe is true. Moving out means divorcing the devil you know. You've got to finally say, I'm done with you. I don't know entirely what that means. I may move into an unknown place. Let me tell you one thing I have learned about working with certain people, not everyone, it's not a blanket statement, but there's a lot of people I've worked with in addiction that what I've discovered of them is half the problem with them walking away is it's become all too familiar. I'm stressed, I reach for that thing, that substance, that relationship, that bottle, that whatever. I'm anxious, I reach for that thing. I'm troubled, I reach for that thing. Well, when you tell someone, then don't reach for that thing anymore, they're like, I have no idea what to reach for then. You're moving me into a no man's land. And they literally have separation anxiety. People who are trapped in toxic relationships, they don't know what to do because the relationship is toxic. They're being harmed in the relationship, but it's better to them than being alone and unknown in a place where no one knows what's going to happen next. I don't know what's going to happen if I'm alone. What happens if no one ever loves me anymore? At least I got someone now. Really? What is that someone doing for you? I don't know, but at least I got someone. And you see, all of that is rooted in a false identity. You can't see yourself as worthy enough to be loved. You see yourself unworthy enough to be beaten up, and yet you're willing to stay there. They're familiar chains that you're not willing to walk away from, rooted. Well, here's what some of the things happen in us, reasons why we won't walk away from the devil we know. One is sympathy from friends. It's comforting. Have you ever met someone that does that? You know, they're always wearing their feelings on their sleeve, and it gets them things. I'm just being honest here. We're keeping this very, very real. Sometimes this is where the familiar devil begins to actually serve you. There's always something wrong that always solicits comfort and sympathy. How about this one? We never have to explore flourishing. This is that fear of success. Do you know what you could be if you just step out, move into something new? I could never do that. Why not? It's the unfamiliar. There's this fear of success. It's easier to stay in the shadows, easier to stay not accountable, easier to take less responsibility, easier to not be fully responsible for our own actions than it is to step into a place of flourishing and say, I can handle this. I can do this. I can step out and do this. Do you think that the shame-crippled boy that his father said of him, I'm embarrassed for anyone to know that that's my son. Remember that. He said that over me. How is it that I can step into a place, even doing what I'm doing before you today? That comes only by the grace and power of God. Only by the grace and power and healing of God. Otherwise, it would just be, I can never flourish. I'm just that, no. Everyone would laugh at me. No, I can't, I could never. See, we need healing. All that's based on a false identity. Now I have a new identity. And you need a new identity too. We don't experience flourishing. Here's another one. We may have a steady stream of resources because of our troubles. If we stay incapacitated, I've seen people like this, intentionally incapacitated for the sake of now I don't have to take up and do for myself that which I should do for myself. Why should that be someone else's responsibility? If you are capable and able in the physical, then we have to explore why are we incapable and unable in the spiritual. Something needs to be healed so we can flourish and move forward and take full responsibility for the steady stream of resources in our life. How about this one? Quite honestly, we just may enjoy the commiseration with other people about our woes. You ever get people together like that? Oh, it's a bad day. Oh, you have no idea how bad the day was, brother. I just about drove my car off the road. Well, let me tell you what. I see you're driving the car off the road and getting hit with a $25 parking fine. Oh, yeah? You think that $25 parking fine is bad? I went in and my wife's yelling at me for not taking care of the dog this morning. Oh, really? Your wife? Well, you ever been there? Commiseration. Entirely happy in their misery. But it's familiar. When you want them to reach for life-giving language, they don't even know where to go or what that looks like. This is why we need to move out. God wasn't going to be able, and because the Israelites were so trapped in the false mindset and the false identity, he couldn't take them into the promised land right away. They were entirely incapable. He had to raise them up, train them. We're going to watch all these movement steps are training you. They're teaching you. They're healing you. They're restoring you. They're renewing your mind. They're transforming you. And they're beautiful steps to get us to move forward. So here's the steps to moving out. The verse that we read at the beginning that talked about Moses saying, commemorate the day. Today, right now, if you're ready to move out of the house of pain you've been living in with an unfaithful spouse, aka the devil you know, then this day is a day to commemorate and celebrate. We know all about commemorating days. Birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, establishment of places days, all those kind of things in history are significant dates to commemorate. Why do we get married on a specific day and we commemorate that day with an anniversary? It is a huge pinnacle moment in our life, and the same can be true of this. When God in future generations talked to his people, who did he describe himself as to them? I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. I am the God who brought you out of Egypt with a strong hand. This is God saying, I am known by what I do, how I work, what I've done, and who I am, and the power I have. That's the God you serve. And we own that right up to this day. You do know that we're part of the generations that come in under Israel. We are part of those generations as believers in Jesus. So we can commemorate this day. God, I don't even know where I'm going. I'm about ready to step into the unknown, but you've said move, and it's time for me to divorce the devil I know. It means I'm not reaching back for those emotions. It means I'm not going back to those old behaviors. It means I'm not reaching for those old patterns. It's time to step forward. It's unknown. To be honest with you, God, I am scared half to death. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what my future holds, but I know who you are, and I know that you will hold me in your hand. I know that you will not let me go. I know you won't let me stumble. I know that you will honor my decision to move away from what the devil's saying and into what you're saying, and so I'm moving. We're going. That's good stuff. So commemorate the day. And here's the ways you can do that. Say goodbye. I had a conversation with someone once who had lost their spouse. They'd been married for many, many years. They were in their late 70s and had lost their spouse to death. And I talked to them one day, and they said, I don't know how to get beyond this. And I suggested something to them, a very cathartic kind of experience. I said, write your own obituary. I said, I know there was an obituary, but it can even be to the things. They were having trouble letting go of the things that were still in the house, the reminders. They knew they needed to move on. They knew God was calling them forward. And those things were reminders of pain, but they were familiar, and they just wrestling with letting go. It was one of the most freeing things for that person. They came to me later and said, I did what you said. Never shared it with anyone. It was between them and God. I am saying goodbye once and for all, and I'm moving on. And they were able then to give up the rest of the things from the house and experienced a new level of freedom. Not that they don't remember that spouse who they shared many, many years, many children with, tons of wonderful memories, but they had to say goodbye. Life, we know our lives move in seasons, right? You know, I'm not going to graduate from high school again. Please, dear Lord, I never want to do that again. Neither are you, right? You got right. We're never going to go down that path again. That's how significant this is. That season of life is over, and I'm willing to commemorate it. Today is a new day. Say goodbye. All kidding aside, write a divorce decree. Dear past behaviors, today I file for divorce. I am not going to be joined at the hip to you 1 second longer. I'm saying goodbye. Write it out. This is where you take your pen. I'm being dead serious about it. We are keeping it real. You've been loving it too long. You're entering into a covenant relationship with your junky past. It's time to write a divorce decree. Covenant over. Write a formal declaration, whatever it takes. The second thing that we need to do is we need to seek the powerful hand of God. The hand of God in Scripture is this amazing image of God's power. If God's hand is with you, do you hear what he said? I'm leading you out with what? A mighty hand. Like his hand of guidance and power is pushing him forward. This is the way God's hand moves us, gently and yet firmly and powerfully. If the hand of God is against you, beware. When the hand of God is against God's enemies, they're fallen. They're going. But when the hand of God is with you, seek his hand. Lord, I need your hand around me, behind me, hold me. I want to sense the tangible presence of your power. I need to know, God, that you are with me. I can't do this alone. I don't have my own strength to do this. I'm seeking your power and your strength. When we seek the hand of God, here are the three things that typically come up. It is God's power. It is his means. You don't have the means to get to the new place. When the Israelites left Egypt, they neither knew where they were going, nor did they have the means to get there. God had to provide that. And then finally, the direction. Where am I going? Have you heard, people trapped in in a bad dysfunctional relationship or abusive relationship, you'll hear them say, if I leave, where do I go? Right? That's a very real fear. I mean, we're talking no one wants to move out of a house and be homeless. But the truth is, being in a home full of abuse is about as homeless as you can be anywhere. That's no definition of home. And sometimes you got to take very scary but real steps to move forward. This is very real stuff we're talking about. When we say goodbye to our past, sometimes those things come attached to people, places, and things. And it's time for those things to go. So seek the hand of the Lord. You'll see at the bottom in your workbook on page 18 a prayer. We're constantly leading you to prayer. It's a suggestion. You can add your own words to it. Let it guide you into praying and just keep praying. Open your mouth and begin speaking to God. Confess your fear. Tell God what you want to do, and then determine to move forward and seek his hand of power. Here's the third step as we move out, is don't hesitate. Just do it. Don't hesitate. So many times we know the right move to make and fear paralyzes us, or we stop and we begin to overanalyze. Now, at the same time, we shouldn't make hasty decisions, right? You know, sometimes we act hastily or we act in compulsion. But if we know that it's the devil we know that is what we're dealing with, and we're trying to move out, say goodbye, move forward with our life, but we're fearful, we may stop and begin to justify. Well, maybe if I stay longer, they'll change. Well, maybe if I stay longer, I'll actually be able to do some good by staying here. Really? Well, you know, if I just wait, let me wait. Let me tell you a very destructive story. This is true. This is absolutely true. I once served on a team in a community when I was pastoring a church in this community that a number of pastors gathered together and said, we're going to help deal with the addiction issue in our community together. And we created a phone line. It wasn't really a crisis response line, but so people could call in and get spiritual guidance. So one night we get a call from a lady, and she had struggled with addiction, I mean, a good chunk of her adult life. And she was high on heroin that night and called, and someone got a hold of her. The phone call itself didn't get answered right away, but God led her to one of the participating churches in our ministry, and she walked in. She was there. People prayed with her. They pleaded with her, go to the hospital. Go. You need to go. It's time for you to say goodbye to this. She said, I can't go. They said, why can't you go? My son has this appointment in the morning. I've got to take him. I can't just walk away from him tonight. He'll end up in custody, and I don't know what's going to happen, and I'm really scared. Just let me go home. I promise you I will go there tomorrow. When she couldn't be persuaded to do anything different, they said their goodbyes, prayed for her again, and she went home. She realized when she got home how long it had been since her last hit of heroin. And she began to do the rationalizing in her mind, and she goes, if I just do one more hit to get me through the night, tomorrow morning I will take my son to that appointment, and then I will go and check myself into the hospital. She took that one last hit, and it was laced with so much fentanyl, she died in an instant and was found dead. I mean, why are we waiting? Why are we waiting to say goodbye to the devil we know? The devil comes to do three things: kill, steal, and destroy. And he's doing it all. Well, maybe he'll kill me slowly if I just wait one more day. I'm not dead yet. Sometimes when we know it's time to move, we need to seek the hand of God, the wisdom of God, the timing of God. And if we know it, we need to say, I don't have all the information, but I'll go. Trusting you. It's time. It's time to move out of the land of oppression. The other thing is to move out without hesitation. Here's the other thing. We need to avoid contaminants. Moses told them not to eat any bread that had yeast in it. Yeast gets all the way through the dough and it makes it rise, right? In the negative, Jesus compared yeast to the Pharisees. He told the disciples and the people to beware of the yeast of the Pharisees. In other words, their influence, right? So here's the other thing you need to beware of if you're hesitating and moving out to the just do it, is don't let the negative voices speak in your life again. You ever have those naysayers? You know, really? You're thinking of doing what? Have you lost your mind? You know, come on, just come back. Why do they tell you in certain recovery settings, you got to guard people, places, and things? Why do you need to do that? Because those people have voices. They've had great influence on your life. And the voices that have had influence on your life in the negative, in the things in the past that you're walking away from, if you hesitate long enough, they will catch up with you and convince you to stay. And that's the yeast contaminants. Beware the yeast of the past. Don't eat it. Commemorate the day. Seek the hand of God. Don't hesitate. Just do it. And finally, here's the good news at the end of this. It's all good news, but here's the really hopeful forward point. Prepare to be made new. Why must we see the path before us as just a vacuum? It's not. It's an opportunity. If the old has passed away and all things have become new, there's a transition there. Something has to die and something has to come to life. This is where our participation is the movement. God is going to bring the power. He's going to bring the means. He's going to show you the way. He's going to give all the provision. We have to participate by moving. That's it. By not hesitating. By walking away from everything that we knew. This is like Lot and his wife leaving Sodom and Gomorrah. Don't turn around. Keep going. Set your face right ahead. And keep going. Prepare to be made new. This is an ending, but guess what? It's also a beginning. If you can see your way to that, well, everything I knew is ending. There's a one way to say, everything I knew is ending. I have no idea what lies ahead. Say, you know what? Everything I knew is ending. And all I know is that God is in whatever lies ahead. He's preparing me to be made new. Prepare to enter the unfamiliar yet glorious place that God will show you. Remember, he's moving them toward a land of promise, but when they walk out of Egypt, they're not there yet. And in fact, there's a lot of the story left to come. The scriptures tell us in 2 Corinthians 5:17, it's at the bottom of page 19 in your workbook. Therefore, if anyone is in the Messiah, he is a new creation. Old things have disappeared, and look, all things have become new. That's excellent news. God has in mind to make you new. He's asking you to give up the old. Are you ready to move out of your Egypt? Are you ready to move forward? So what are we moving away from? Well, here's the things over on page 20 in your workbook that we are moving away from. First, we are moving away from the false identity and the false mindset. We are moving away from those things on purpose. You'll notice that in Romans we read, therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. And then here's the kingpin phrase here. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. This is where you can talk to God and you can say, I have allowed my mind, I have allowed my life to be conformed to all this junk in the past. I have allowed my identity to be shaped by all the lies. I've allowed my mindset to be shaped by the identity. I want to be transformed by the renewing of my mind, and I can't be renewed unless I walk away from that stuff. So here we go. I don't even know what it looks like. I confess to you I will be tempted to go back. I confess to you that I don't know what the future looks like, but I'm going to do it. You have a space here on this page. What are the traits of your false identity? Well, I don't know. It's your identity. Well, then write what you believe about yourself and let them stare back at you. Are they things in the negative that need to go? How would you plan to leave them behind? You say, well, I may not know. That's the whole reason that question's there. You've never thought how to leave them behind, but now we're going to ask you, how do you plan to leave them behind? How? That says I got to come up with a plan. So those are the internal things, the false identity and the false mindset. But now there's externals as well. Toxic people, places, and things. We've talked about this. Proverbs 14:7 gives us wisdom. It says, stay away from a foolish man, for you will not find knowledge on his lips. Wow, that sounds simple, doesn't it? Stay away from a fool. Sure. How many people do you find are just attracted to foolishness? Oh my goodness, just open your social media like for 5 minutes and you'll find all kinds of people flocking to foolishness. It's everywhere. We love it. And then people are checking, last night alone I got like 2 messages. that were like these chain things that were debunked as false like years ago. It's like, here we go again. Really? People are circulating that we're just, plant the hook and drag us along, right? We sometimes follow the foolish voices. God, make me wise. I don't want to be sucked in by the foolish voices. Teach me your ways. You've said if any of us lacks wisdom, that you would give it. I'm asking you for wisdom. Help me not to be so gullible to those things. Help me to learn which ones to just shut off altogether that I don't need and to listen for your voice more. Give me your wisdom. And then here's where it gets tough with people. It's real easy to say, oh yeah, leave toxic people behind. Really? That requires sometimes some really deep counsel, a lot of thought. It requires thinking through some really difficult changes in your life. This is not an easy question to answer. Even breaking long-standing friendships, you'll know they're toxic if you begin to think about breaking it and you already have dread over the repercussions that will come for doing it. When your mind just goes, wow, I'm playing out these scenarios and I would rather stay in the relationship than go through the scenario that's playing in my mind, then you know the relationship's toxic. Now you got to make a plan to say goodbye. You'll be glad you did. You really will. But these are tough. What if that's a family member? What if it's a spouse? What if? What if it's someone who spoke all kinds of toxic things into your life and they're no longer alive? See, these are things we have to process through. We have to let God in to help us because there is possibility to have restoration and restitution without actually having the person present. God can come in and help us heal. You're going to see that happen in my own story. How God actually helped me to discover healing from two people who weren't even around anymore to be able to have a conversation with. Only God can do that beautiful work, but it's possible. Sometimes we have to take brave steps. This is what the moving out is about. There's another thing that we have to move away from, and this is a hard thing to move away from. Voices, opinions, and judgments. Anyone in your brokenness ever have the voices in your head that won't stop talking? Been there, done that. Whole dresser full of the t-shirts, right? When we have the voices speaking in our mind, that's really hard because we don't know how to create the separation. We feel like wherever I go, there they are. They follow me. But we can begin to make separation from them. This becomes into the place where we're going to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. Sometimes I wanted to curse God for my memories. You ever want to do that? Lord, this horrible thing happened to me. I just curse you that we even have this thing called a memory. But think back to when God first created. He created this beautiful existence, put the man and the woman in the garden. Had they eaten from the tree of life, just imagine what a wonderful storehouse the memories of that person would be. Just full of life and love of God and love of one another and wholeness. God's gift of a memory is actually a wonderful and awesome and precious thing that he's given us. But sin has tainted it, and the enemy comes in now and wants to use our memories to haunt us, and we want to curse God with something that's actually so beautiful. At least I did. Lord, I wish that memory would get out of my mind. Why is that there? And again, in my story, you're going to hear there is freedom from the voices, because when healing comes and you are finally healed, their accusing no longer holds any weight over you. They will no longer instigate fear. They will no longer raise up dread. They will no longer make you become paralyzed in moving forward, because it no longer matters, because you've been healed. They're all still there. The circumstances don't change, but your mind is transformed. That's where we're going. That's what we're moving away from and out of. It's time to leave Egypt. God could never have prepared the people to enter the promised land had they not first just packed up and moved out. away from the oppressive people, the oppressive place, and the oppressive thing by seeking his hand. It starts with one movement, and that's what you are being called to do. It's going to be one movement. You got to take one step in a new direction. You have to take one step away from the old influence. You have to take one step in the direction of your healing, in the direction of his voice, in the direction of his calling, in the direction of his power, and he will be there to meet you and guide you and heal you, and now you're on your way. You can't be on your way if you're sitting alone in Egypt going, I'll never get to the promised land, I'll never get to the promised land, I'll never get to the promised land. Only until you move will be, now I'm one step closer. Amen? I'm going to send you away to process through this work. Do the work. Put your pen on the paper. If you don't know how to answer the questions, that's okay. Let it challenge your thoughts. Let it open your mind. Let God in to begin this mighty work of deliverance and take the brave steps. Amen. Amen. God bless you as you go back to your groups or your alone time to do this. And when we come back, we're going to continue in moving forward toward our promised land. Well, as you can see, when you've lived somewhere for a very long time, it's not easy to move out, right? But we have to leave our familiar places. We talked about this devil that we know in this session. We've talked about how we have to divorce the devil that we know if we're going to move out. So now is the time to begin to process through these thoughts. What are the familiar things that, even though they've been harmful, that somehow you're still participating with, and it's fearful to leave them because you're not sure where you're going? That's okay. Write down a plan. Your plan to move out is included in your workbook. Get your pen out. You're going to move away from the places of slavery and begin a journey into new places. Don't worry that you don't know where they are, because God has this. His help is with you, remember. So these things are going to be unfamiliar as you journey, but God is with you. Let that thought guide you as you process through the different pieces in your workbook, and then when you're ready, we'll be back and join together for our next session.